Okay, this video is going to be the first video for 1311 Embedded System Programming. In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up a development environment so that you can both produce and run your C programs for satisfying the homework assignments that we'll do this semester. The environment that you're going to set up is going to be a very simple command line based C programming environment using the GCC compiler. And it is very different if you've ever done anything with C programming in, say, Visual Studio or some other larger integrated development environment. This is going to be a very low level, very simple way of programming with C. So if you're in Canvas, you're probably seeing something like this. This is fall 2019 is the current semester that we're in. If you click on modules, you will see a link to this video that I'm actually recording right now. The link won't work right now until I get it uploaded. But this is going to take you through the steps that you need to perform in order to do what I like to call homework 0. It's really not a homework assignment. You're not getting credit for it, but it is necessary to set up this environment so that you can do subsequent homeworks going forward. Going back to the home page, and we'll go over this in more detail in class. There are some comments here about required material for the class and some things about required basic requirements for a computer if you are in the market for a computer. We'll talk about this more in class. There's a link here to the recommendations that the university gives you for a computer, and I have my own personal comments and opinions here as well. We can talk about that more in class. The thing that I really want to get to in this video is installing and creating your development environment. And it's going to be based on two products that are free to download. One is called cygwin, and that's going to be the terminal that you're going to type in, and you're going to do your compiling and do the execution of the programs that you write. And another one is called Notepad. Notepad is just simply a text editor that is very handy to use. If you're not familiar with it, I think you'll appreciate it as a product going forward. So let's get started with cygwin first. Click on this link right here, and it will take you to this page right here. cygwin is a product that installs on a Windows computer, and it emulates something called a bash shell. B-A-S-H, bash shell. It's really a Linux terminal, and it runs on the Linux operating system, but this is one that runs on Windows, and we can use it to install and run a C compiler. Now, if you're going to install this on a Windows machine, you have to know whether or not you are running a 64-bit machine or a 32-bit machine. You can do that very easily by opening up a file browser, going to this PC, right-click on this PC, and go to Properties. This will bring up a window that tells you about your system type. And as you can see, I'm running Windows 10, and it says it's a 64-bit operating system running on a 64-bit computer. It's really that right here where it says x64 based processor. That's what I'm looking for. I'm on a 64-bit machine. So when I download cygwin, I'm going to download this file right here called setup x8664.exe. When I do that, that is going to show up in my downloads folder. And here it is right there, this .exe file. Double click on this to run it, and you're going to go through these steps. You'll take most of the defaults except for one critical place where I'm going to have to alter the default. So pay attention to this very closely. Click Next, Install from Internet, make sure you're on a good connection. Take the default for this root directory. Do not change this. So far we're just taking the defaults. It's going to install it in a local account. The presumption is you have a local account on your machine. So of course mine, my local account is just Greg, so it's going to install this under users/Greg/downloads. Clicking next here, take the default on that. It's going to give you all choices of available download sites. Any of them will work. Take the first one and click next. Now once it goes through this step, it's going to get to a page that looks like this. Now, since I have already installed cygwin, this is going to may look a little bit different for you. But what I need you to do is go to this drop-down menu right here where it says View, click on Full, and then in the search window right here, type GCC. Don't hit enter there. Let it actually filter that on all of the products that have GCC on them. What you're going to see, one line that you're going to see, and this is the only line that you're going to need to alter on this installation, it says GCC Core. And it's probably going to say, for you, it's going to say skip. Click on the little drop-down menu where it says skip on GCC Core, and select the line that says, it'll say 7.4.0-1. That's what it'll probably say here. Again, this is the beginning of the fall 2019 semester. Select that 7.4.0-1. Don't select the 8.3. That's something that they're still testing. So select the 7.4, and I'm just going to I'm going to select keep on mine because I've already installed this. That's the only thing that you need to do differently than the basic setup. When you hit next there, it will run through the full installation, and it takes a few minutes to do it. Let it complete that, and if it's successful, you'll be ready to go with cygwin. So assuming that you do that, let that run. The other thing that you're going to need to install, or that I suggest that you install, sorry, don't need that at the moment. The other thing that you're going to need to install is this thing called Notepad++. And this is just a very, very handy tool that's good to have. Also, download the latest one. Go to the download link there on the side. And there is a choice for either a 32-bit version or a 64-bit version. There is an installer. Download the installer, and just like you did with the cygwin, run that installer. Take all of the defaults and let that complete, and you should be good for using Notepad++. There is a little video here on YouTube, not produced by me, but it's a good introduction to Notepad++. Goes through a lot of some details on the features. In class, we're going to go through it pretty thoroughly to teach you how to use it. But it's really just a text editor. It is for creating text files, which you will subsequently compile into executables and run in the cygwin terminal. So now that you have cygwin installed, assuming you do have it installed properly, you should be able to go to your start menu, and if you just start typing cygwin, you will come up with this. You should see something, it'll say cygwin 64 terminal, maybe 32 terminal if you have the 32-bit version. And if you like, you can pin it to your start menu or pin it to your taskbar. I like to pin it to my taskbar, that's why the choice is unpin right here. But I have it on my taskbar right here, and when I click this once, the cygwin terminal comes up. Now you can resize this and even zoom in a little bit. I'm using my touchpad to kind of pinch and zoom on that. What you'll see right here, it'll be a very simple prompt. If you hit return a couple of times, it won't really do anything, but that $ is waiting for you to enter a command. The first thing to check to make sure that the installation ran correctly is to type GCC. If you type it and you get this error right here, that actually means that you have it installed correctly, because GCC expects you to enter in a file name of something that you're going to compile. In fact, the other thing you can do is type GCC and a space and then -v. That means tell me the version of GCC that I have. When you enter that, it will tell you, it will give you a lot of information, but the last thing down here it should say is that it is GCC version 7.4, and that's what you chose when you installed cygwin. So you are on your way, you're doing just fine. Now, the other thing about cygwin is that it is, as I said, a Linux terminal. So if you're not familiar with working with terminals in general, and especially not with Linux, you're going to have to start getting used to that. What I've provided here under command reference, this FossWire link right here, and I already have this up right here. This is a PDF that shows some basic Linux commands. So I'm going to have this off to the side and bring up the cygwin terminal as well. Here's a good one. Clear is a nice command that will just clear out the window so you can kind of see what you're doing without anything else in the way. And you can run down most of these commands without doing any harm to the computer. ls is a very nice one. It tells you, it just lists the files that are in that folder. As of right now, I don't have any files in this folder. The other thing, the next one to type is the pwd command to say, well, what is my present working folder? Folders are really called directories in Linux. So what is my current directory that I'm in? And that comes back and it says, well, you're in /home/Greg. And the question might be, okay, does that have an equivalent under the Windows file system? And indeed it does. Let me bring up a fresh Windows File Explorer and show you where that equivalent folder is. And this you will have to go right to the root of your C drive, okay, C drive, and you should now have a cygwin 64 folder. Expand that folder, and then there's a home folder right there. Expand that, and then Greg is right there. Okay, so when I'm viewing the contents of this folder called Greg, you'll see that I'm actually seeing 5 different files in there, and they all are files that have a leading dot at the beginning. The file names themselves start with a period, and files that have a leading dot actually are hidden files. So in my Windows file browser, I've gone to the View menu and I've enabled a checkbox here that says Show Hidden Items. In other words, if I turn that off, it's supposed to actually hide those. It's not working at the moment. But there are my hidden files, and it actually says Show File Extensions. I like to have both of those checked, and I like to view things via details. Okay, so now let's see if I'm really in that equivalent location in my Linux file system. As I said, the ls command, let me drop this down a little bit. The ls command is supposed to list files that are in that current directory. Notice the second command in this little helpful handy dandy reference says ls space -al, and that says a formatted listing with hidden files. So if I type that command, ls space -al, and enter that, there it actually shows me a listing of all of the files that are in that folder with a little bit more information about who owns the file, the date that it was created, and just a little more information than what you would normally see in Windows. But now you can see those hidden files, and you can kind of confirm that yes, indeed, those are the exact same files that I do see in the Windows file system. So hopefully that gives you a little comfort about whether or not I am seeing the right things. Now, in this environment, I want to be able to create a source file, a file that has C code in it, and I want to be able to compile that code and test it out in this environment. So let's do that really quickly. What I'm going to do is go back to our Canvas page, and one of the things that we're going to use in this class is something called an online textbook called Learn C Programming. It's a very handy tutorial. Here's the page that you first get to when you click on that link right there. And I will also say a little bit of caution on this page. If it comes up, it will probably pop up and ask you if you want notifications from this page. Please tell it not to give you notifications. The notifications that come from this page are a little bit spamish in nature. It's a good page otherwise. You know, I can't blame them for wanting to generate some revenue by advertising, but do not allow notifications from this page. Otherwise, it's a good handy reference. One of the reasons it's a good handy reference is because there's a lot of source code that we can just simply copy and paste into our source code files and work with. And in particular, well, if you will go to the program structure link and skip this environment setup, we're literally doing the environment setup now. So go to the program structure right here, and you'll see that the very first thing is this hello world example. And this is a very traditional way of learning C programming. Your first program should always be a hello world program. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of that information, all of that source code right there, and I'm just going to do a Control C just to copy it into my clipboard so that I can paste it into a file later. Let's go back here. Now, since I don't have a source code file yet, there are many different ways that you could generate that source file. If I wanted to do it in Windows, I could come here, I could right-click, I could say New Text Document, and create something called helloworld.c. And it would be very crucial that I end this file with a .c file extension. I don't want to end it with a .txt because I want my compiler to understand that it's a C source file. Let me show you a different way to do it. I can do it directly from the bash shell. And let me get my reference up here. There is a command that is listed right here. Touch, right there. It says touch, and then you give it a file name, and that will create, or it says create or update a file. So I'm going to use that command. Let me scroll up a little bit so I can get all of this on the screen. I'm going to bring the Windows file browser. Notice that my Windows file browser just only shows those hidden files right now. There's nothing else in that folder. So I'm going to run that touch command, and I'm going to create a file called hello.c. So the Linux command that I'm using is the command called touch, and I am going to touch this file called hello.c. And watch what happens in my Windows file browser at the same time. There it is, that hello.c file got created. The other interesting thing is that since I have installed the Notepad++ tool, the .c file is already associated with Notepad++. Okay, so if I double-click that file, Notepad++ pops up. And again, we will be using this Notepad++ tool quite a bit, but it's a basic it is a very basic text editor. It's got a lot of things beyond a basic Notepad tool, and you'll appreciate those as we go through this class. But notice that I didn't have to do anything to actually open Notepad++ first. Once I had this file with a .c extension, I just double-clicked it and ran it. Other thing that's really nice about this, all of these other files, if I wanted to open that in Notepad++, since I've installed the tool, I could right-click on this file called .bash_history. And there's a context-sensitive choice right here. If I right-click on that, it says Edit with Notepad++. And there is that file right there. It is just a simple text file, and you can look at it. We'll talk about what it means later. Now, this file called hello.c has no content to it. It's empty. I created the file, but there's nothing in it. But remember, I copied that source code from the web page, from the tutorials point web page. So now I can come here and just do Control-V and paste it in right there. Now I have that entire program copied into that file called hello.c. And I'm going to do a Control-S to save that. If I come over here to my bash shell, and let's rerun that command that lists all of the files that are in there. Now you can see if I do the ls space -al, it'll list everything, including hello.c. If I do the ls just by itself, it only lists the hello.c. It doesn't list the hidden files. So remember that -al said include hidden files along with that. Again, you can go. I encourage you to play around with these Linux commands. Another nice one, right here, let's see, cat. Cat says place standard input into file. Cat is a way to print the contents of a file to the screen. So if I do cat hello.c, I can print the contents of that file to the screen. Just kind of a handy way to maybe check the contents of the file. It's not really a way to edit the file. In order to change the file and save it and make it do something, you would need to do that with Notepad++. So I'm going to clear this out. Remember, the only file that's there that's not hidden is the hello.c file. Now, if I want to take that source code and compile it into an executable program, I can do that with the GCC compiler that I have installed here. Remember, GCC gave you an error if you didn't give it an input file. Well, let's give it an input file now. So I'm going to say GCC space hello.c. When I hit enter there, Notice it really doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't give any errors. It doesn't really say anything. But let's do an ls now, and you'll notice that now I have not only my source code called hello.c, I have another file there that's called a.exe. So the .exe files, traditionally in a Windows file system, means that those are executable files. I mean, you can run them. They will do something if you execute them. To execute a file in a bash shell or in a Linux shell is a little different than doing it in Windows. If this was a Windows terminal, you would just simply type a.exe in order to run that. In the Linux environment, you have to precede an executable with a // So ./a.exe, and that will execute the program called hello.c. Again, now remember that the source code is in the file hello.c. The actual executable file is the a.exe. And if you remember, what does that file do? It's supposed to print hello world to the screen. And if you look at this, we'll talk more about the contents and why it worked in class. But if you are here, if you have success here, you know that you have a properly set up GCC environment where you can compile source code. And if you have source code that's already written, you can paste it into a file, run it, and it should work for you. I will say also in this bash shell, although you do need the / to execute a file, you don't need the .exe. So if you just type the /a, it will actually execute. I'll also say, of course, that the file name doesn't have to be A. There are ways to create other file names. We can rename that file. It doesn't have to be named a.exe, but that's the traditional first way to do it. Okay, so if you're at this point, you have completed the module 0, the homework 0 that was called out on Canvas. And let's just make sure there's nothing else in that module. So yeah, that was just that homework 0. This video, you've watched this video, you've gone through the process of installing Notepad++ and cygwin, the cygwin bash shell. Now let me also go back to the home page here and just say very quickly that if you are on a Mac, and all of these instructions, of course, are for Windows. I am using a Windows 10 laptop, and that is a pretty easy process. All of these tools are free to download and use, and it's pretty simple. On a Mac, there is a way to also install a very similar tool in something called Terminal and get the GCC compiler into Terminal. If you are on a Mac, go ahead and follow these instructions for making that happen. And in addition, there is something called Brackets, is a text editor that you can download and use on a Mac that is very similar to Notepad++. If by chance you are maybe using a Linux machine for this course, that's great. I will say that I do have some expertise with Linux, and if you are doing that, you are probably already maybe even beyond this class, but there is a built GCC and a basic gedit text editor are simply built into Linux. If you need help with that, I am happy to help you with that. So again, if you are on a Mac, run through these procedures for getting Xcode into the terminal program, and everybody should be at this same point where they have a terminal and a text editor that they can create source code and generate executables. All right, so that is the first expectation, getting here before we move on to any other homeworks. Okay, all right, see you in class.